I was standing in the middle of an office building that felt more like a greenhouse than a workplace. Sweat soaking through my shirt. Insulation dust itching my arms. Staring up at a ceiling tile that should never have been touched. Above me, the air conditioner was roaring at full blast. And still blowing hot air. That's when I realized something was very, very wrong. And a few days later. Because one greedy slumlord refused to let us out of a lease he never honored. His entire building would be condemned by the city. If you've ever been trapped by someone with power who thought paperwork mattered more than people. If you've ever been disrespected, ignored, and told to deal with it, then hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, and buckle up. Because this is one of those revenge stories where justice doesn't whisper. It slams the door shut. This story isn't about me personally owning a building or running a company. It's about the company I worked for at the time. And a trip I took that was supposed to be simple. Routine. Boring, even. I was the IT guy. The kind of employee people only notice when something breaks. Servers, switches, wiring, networks. Invisible work, until it isn't. Our company had a remote site that needed to be moved into a new building. New city, new lease, fresh start. On paper, it looked fine. 5-year lease, decent square footage, nothing flashy, but functional. The landlord promised the building would be ready. Turnkey, they called it. Move-in ready. Just bring your desks, your people, and get to work. Before anyone moved in, I was asked to go out there and mark network drops. Just figure out where computers, printers, and access points would go so the landlord could handle the wiring. That's when the first red flag appeared. The landlord flat out refused to install any low-voltage cabling. No Cat 6. No conduits. Nothing. He basically said, "That's your problem." We got quotes from contractors. Thousands of dollars. Way more than the company wanted to spend for a building. We hadn't even stepped foot in yet. So management looked at me. And I looked at my car. And 4 boxes of Cat 6 plenum-rated cable. I'd run cable before. A lot of it. Fire systems, security, data, you name it. So I said yes. 8-hour drive. One guy with me, our facilities manager. 30 drops total. Not insane, but not easy either, especially in an already built space. Drop ceiling, insulation sitting right on top. The kind that rains fiberglass down your sleeves and makes you itch in places you didn't know could itch. Messy work. Physical work. The kind that makes you earn every dollar. We arrived Monday morning. Start of the month. Early. The kind of summer morning that tricks you. Cool breeze, blue sky, nothing to warn you what was coming. We unlocked the doors, walked in, and at first, everything felt fine. Quiet. Empty. New carpet smell mixed with drywall dust. I remember thinking, okay. This isn't so bad. About an hour later, someone mentioned it felt warm. Not unbearable. Just off. We shrugged it off. We were from further south. Heat didn't scare us. But by noon, the temperature hit 80. By 3 p.m., it was 85. And that's when it stopped being uncomfortable. And started being oppressive. The rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows turned into literal greenhouses. Sunlight poured in and stayed there. The air felt thick. Heavy. Like breathing through a wet towel. Sweat ran down my back while I was crawling above the ceiling. Dragging cable through insulation, my arms itching non-stop. That's when we learned something that should have stopped everything immediately. The workers still on site casually mentioned, "Oh yeah. The leasing company knew the AC was broken like 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Let that sink in. They handed over a building with no working air conditioning. In summer. And didn't say a word. And that wasn't even the worst part. Because there were still workers on site. Not touch-ups. Not minor fixes. Full-on construction. Tools. Ladders. Exposed areas. The building wasn't finished. This wasn't a handover. This was a lie dressed up as one. Day 1 was supposed to be move-in day. Instead, it felt like we had broken into a job site. By the end of that first day, we were exhausted, drenched in sweat, and already irritated. But we told ourselves it was temporary. Surely they'd fix the AC overnight. Surely this would get better. It didn't. By the time we walked back into the building on day 2, the heat hit us before the door even closed behind us. It was barely morning, not even 9 a.m. yet. And the air already felt stale, thick, unmoving. You know that feeling when a room has been closed up too long and no fresh air has passed through it. Multiply that by 10. The thermometer on my phone read just under 80 degrees. And the sun hadn't even reached its peak. My shirt stuck to my back within minutes. The building wasn't waking up for the day. It was already suffocating. The facilities manager with me was usually a calm guy. Practical. Measured. The kind of man who handled problems with checklists and phone calls. Not shouting. That morning, I watched him snap. He stood in the middle of the unfinished office space. Phone pressed hard against his ear. Face red, veins visible in his neck. Yelling at someone on the other end about fixing the damn AC. Not asking. Not requesting. Demanding. Because at this point, this wasn't an inconvenience anymore. This was a health issue. Meanwhile, I climbed back into the ceiling. Every ceiling tile I lifted dumped another layer of insulation. Dust onto my arms and face. My skin burned. Sweat mixed with fiberglass, turning every movement into torture. The air above the ceiling was even worse, trapped heat with nowhere to go. I kept telling myself to just finish the drops. Focus. One cable at a time. Get it done and get out. That's when I found it. I moved one ceiling tile aside and froze. Right in front of me was a 4-foot hole ripped straight through the ducting. Not cracked. Not loose. A clean, ugly gap. The AC was technically running. The fans were spinning. The system was pushing air. But the cold air wasn't reaching us. Because it was spilling straight into the ceiling cavity. The building was trying to cool itself by air conditioning the insulation. I just stared at it for a few seconds, heat pounding in my head. Sweat dripping off my nose, thinking. You've got to be kidding me. This wasn't bad luck. This was negligence stacked on top of negligence. When we reported it, we were told the compressor was broken. Just like that. Casual. As if a broken compressor in the middle of summer was no big deal. As if people weren't expected to work in here. By mid-afternoon, we were wrecked. Dehydrated. Short-tempered. Everyone working in the building looked defeated. Productivity dropped to 0. People moved slowly, spoke less, and snapped quicker. The heat stripped away professionalism and left only irritation behind. That night, driving back to the hotel, my head throbbed and my arms were on fire from the insulation. I slept like garbage, stuck to the sheets, knowing we had to go back. Day 3 was worse, because hope showed up just long enough to be crushed. We walked in that morning and, for the first time, heard good news. The AC guys were coming. Scheduled for 10 a.m. Finally. The temperature was already miserable. But at least there was an end in sight. I pushed through the last of the cable runs. Fingers sore from punching down lines on the patch panel. Sweat dripping onto the rack as I worked. Around 10, we heard footsteps and metal clanging. The HVAC crew had arrived. They worked for hours. In and out of the ceiling. Tools clattering. Panels opening and closing. At 2 p.m., cold air finally started coming out of the vents. Real cold air. The kind you feel immediately. The room temperature slowly dropped. And for the first time all week, people stopped complaining. Relief washed over the space like rain after a drought. Something didn't sit right with me, though. When we asked the HVAC guys what they fixed, they were vague. Too vague. A lot of things, one of them said. We pressed again. What exactly did you do? That's when he gave us a line I'll never forget. He said, we can't tell the tenants. Tenants. Not owners. Tenants. Every instinct I had started screaming. That wasn't normal. That wasn't standard. That was secrecy. The kind that exists to hide shortcuts. That night, our realtor emailed us. She dug into what the landlord authorized. According to her, they had changed the refrigerant from R22 to R410A. I read that sentence twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. Anyone who knows HVAC knows that's not a simple swap. That's like putting gasoline into a diesel engine and calling it an upgrade. To do it properly, you'd have to replace the entire system. Compressors, lines, valves. All of it. There was no way they did that in 4 hours. I told the facilities manager exactly what this meant. They didn't fix it. They patched it. Duct tape and WD-40 engineering. Enough to limp along. Enough to shut people up. Enough to pass blame later when it inevitably failed. And when it did, guess who would be stuck paying for a full replacement? Us. By day 4, the mask had completely fallen off. Some areas still didn't have running water. Workers were still present. The AC couldn't keep up once the sun hit full strength, and by late afternoon, the temperature crept back toward 80 again. Even with the system running non-stop. That's not just inefficient. That's dangerous. Machines running constantly without cycling burn out fast. We made the decision to pack everything back up. Desks. Equipment. Network gear. We weren't moving in. Not like this. As we were dismantling what little we had set up, I noticed something strange. The fire sprinklers didn't look right. The metal collars around the drop ceiling had fallen onto the floor in several places. The sprinkler heads themselves were no longer flush with the tiles. Some hung lower. Others were pushed up awkwardly. I climbed back into the ceiling one last time, heart pounding. The truth was worse than I imagined. The HVAC workers had stood on the fire sprinklers to reach the ducting. They had used life-saving fire suppression equipment as a ladder. Those sprinklers are designed to break under heat. Not human weight. One wrong move, one slip, and they could have flooded the entire building or, worse, rendered the system useless in an actual fire. I felt cold despite the heat. This wasn't just sloppy work anymore. This was criminal-level negligence. We contacted the landlord and tried to be professional. Come. We told them they hadn't delivered a finished building. That the lease was broken. That we were leaving. The response came back cold and confident. They pointed to the lease. 36 pages. 5 years. No exit. Our realtor and corporate lawyer reviewed it. Their verdict felt like a punch to the gut. We were cornered. Trapped by paperwork. Trapped by someone who knew exactly how much power they had and didn't care who suffered because of it. That's when desperation turned into focus. Because when you push someone far enough, they stop asking for mercy and start looking for leverage. And that's when I started really looking at the building. By the time we stepped away from the building that afternoon, something inside me had changed. Up until then, I'd been tired, irritated, physically drained. The heat, the dust, the wasted effort. The sheer disrespect of being lied to, all of that had worn me down. But now there was something sharper underneath it. Clarity. When people push you into a corner and then smugly tell you there's no way out, your brain stops screaming and starts scanning. Looking for cracks. Looking for rules they broke while assuming no one would ever check. I had run low-voltage systems for years. Fire alarms. Security. Access control. I knew what buildings were supposed to have. And the more I thought about it, the more a single, ugly question kept repeating in my head. Where is the fire panel? Not a pull station. Not a sprinkler head. The actual fire alarm control panel. The brain of the system. The thing that ties smoke detectors, water flow switches, horns, strobes, all of it, together. Every commercial space has one. Legally. I realized I had never seen it. Not once. Not in the electrical room. Not in the hallways. Nowhere. I went back in alone and started looking. Not casually. Systematically. I checked every mechanical space. Every closet. I followed conduit runs. I traced wires that went nowhere. There were smoke detectors mounted in ceilings that weren't connected to anything. Literally decorative safety devices. Plastic lies screwed into drywall to make the place look compliant. That's when the weight of it hit me. If a fire broke out in that building, there would be no alarm. No alert. No automatic response. People would smell smoke first. Or see flames. Or worse, not notice at all until it was too late. My stomach turned. This wasn't about comfort anymore. This was about lives. While I was processing that, one of our employees, a guy helping move heavy equipment, casually dropped a sentence that detonated in my brain like a flashbang. He said, "Oh yeah, I meant to mention. I never saw any building permits anywhere." I stopped what I was doing and just stared at him. Building permits aren't subtle. They're posted. Visible. Required. Especially for demolition. Plumbing changes, electrical work, HVAC modifications, and fire system alterations. All the things I had watched happen over the past few days. I asked him again, slowly. He confirmed it. No permits. None posted. None mentioned. No inspections. No sign-offs. Nothing. That was the moment everything snapped into place. They hadn't just cut corners. They hadn't just lied. They had rebuilt a commercial space, destroyed critical safety systems, and handed over a building to tenants without city approval. They assumed no one would look. No one would know. No one would care enough to call. I cared. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because my mind wouldn't shut up. I replayed every detail. Every missing label. Every unconnected wire. Every sprinkler head bent out of position. I thought about the landlord confidently telling us we were stuck for 5 years. About the lease. About how calm they sounded when they said no. They weren't calm because they were right. They were calm because they thought they were untouchable. The next morning, I made the call. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't exaggerate. I simply told the city inspector's office that I believed a commercial building had undergone major construction without permits and that its fire systems might be compromised. The woman on the phone asked a few careful questions. Square footage. Type of work. Occupancy. When I mentioned fire suppression and alarm systems, her tone changed. She thanked me and said someone would be out shortly. I hung up and sat there, heart pounding, hands resting on my knees. There was no going back now. This wasn't revenge for discomfort. This was accountability. And deep down, I knew exactly how bad this could get for the landlord. I wasn't there when the inspector arrived. The facilities manager handled that part, but he told me everything afterward. The inspector pulled records first. Digital. Fast. Efficient. It didn't take long to confirm what we already suspected. There were no permits. None pulled. None approved. None closed. When he walked the space, he didn't even try to hide his reaction. Multiple code violations. Electrical. Plumbing. HVAC. Fire safety. He red-tagged our area immediately and removed the certificate of occupancy. That alone would have been devastating for the landlord. But then the facilities manager told him to check the fire system. That's when the inspector stopped, looked around again, and said, "Oh no. No, no, no." He stepped aside and made a call. A call you never want to be responsible for triggering. He called the fire marshal. And at that moment, the building's fate was sealed. By the time the fire marshals arrived, the atmosphere around that building had completely changed. What used to feel like an unfinished office space now felt like a crime scene. Conversations were quieter. Movements slower. Even the workers who had been casually drilling, hammering, and dragging equipment around days earlier now stood off to the side. Arms crossed, eyes following every official step. When people in uniform walk in with clipboards and radios, reality hits hard. The fire marshals didn't waste time. They didn't joke. They didn't make small talk. They started where they always start, with the alarm system. And within minutes, it became painfully obvious that there wasn't one. No active panel in our portion of the building. No monitoring. No audible alarms. No visual strobes. Just dead plastic shells mounted to ceilings and walls, pretending to be safety equipment. Then they checked the sprinklers. And this is where everything went from bad to catastrophic. They traced the sprinkler riser, the main vertical pipe that supplies water pressure to the fire suppression system. And it led straight into our space. Our section of the building. The same space that had been torn apart, rebuilt, and handed over without permits. They tested the water pressure. There was none. Zero. No pressure meant no fire suppression. Not just for our office. One fire. One spark. One electrical fault. And the whole structure would have burned unchecked. The lead fire marshal didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the inspector, nodded once, and said the word that ended everything. Condemned. Not just our area. The entire building. Operations shut down immediately. Red tags everywhere. No occupancy. No exceptions. The landlord's investment, offices, tenants, rental income, all frozen in a single afternoon. People who had nothing to do with us were suddenly affected. Businesses displaced. Schedules destroyed. And all of it traced back to one decision. Cutting corners and assuming no one would call. That's the thing about people who rely on power instead of integrity. They forget the rules apply whether you acknowledge them or not. The landlord went silent. No emails. No calls. No confident lease language. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when someone realizes they're in serious trouble. Eventually, they resurfaced, not with apologies, but with resistance. They still tried to argue. Still tried to push blame. Still tried to posture. It didn't work. The city had spoken. The fire marshal had spoken. And when safety officials make a call like that, there is no negotiation. No fine you can write that fixes it overnight. No clause in a lease that overrides public safety. They refunded our deposit. They refunded the rent. Quietly. Quickly. Without a fight. And now, we're pushing for more. For the labor. For the moving costs. For the wiring. For the wasted time. Our lawyer is thrilled. He knows exactly how this ends. Because when you trap people in bad faith, when you ignore safety, when you gamble with lives to save money, you don't just lose a tenant. You lose everything. Once the building was officially condemned, the power dynamic didn't just shift, it collapsed. Everything the landlord had been hiding behind for weeks. All that confidence, all those lease pages, all that quiet arrogance, vanished overnight. There were no more legal threats. No more, you signed a 5-year lease. No more pretending this was just a misunderstanding. Because when the city steps in and slaps red tags on your doors, paperwork stops meaning anything. We got our deposit back first. Then the rent. Both returned faster than any previous email had ever been answered. No explanation attached. No apology. Just money quietly moving back into our account, like a bribe made of silence. But we weren't done. Not even close. We had records. Time logs. Travel expenses. Hotel stays. Labor costs. Wiring supplies. Photos. Emails. Proof of everything. The cost of moving equipment in. The cost of moving it out. The cost of my time crawling through insulation. Wiring a building that should never have been occupied in the first place. When we sent the demand, our lawyer didn't even sugarcoat it. He laid it out clearly. They could pay. Or they could pay a lot more once the court got involved. And here's the part that still makes me smile. Our lawyer was happy. Not politely confident. Not cautiously optimistic. Genuinely happy. He told us they didn't have a leg to stand on. That the lease meant nothing once the building was deemed unsafe. That attempting to enforce it could actually make things worse for the landlord. If a judge decided to look deeper into the permit violations and fire safety negligence. He even joked that if they wanted to drag this out, he'd happily let them pay his fees too. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about accountability. About consequences. About someone finally being forced to answer for years of cutting corners and betting that no one would push back. I thought back to that first day. The heat. The sweat. The frustration. How small and powerless we felt standing in a half-finished building. Being told no by someone who thought ownership made them untouchable. I remembered the itching insulation, the broken duct. The sprinkler heads bent out of place. I remembered the moment I realized there was no fire panel. No permits. No safety net. And I realized something else too. Revenge doesn't always look like yelling, lawsuits, or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it looks like a calm phone call. A simple report. letting the system do exactly what it was designed to do, protect people from greed. We didn't break the rules. We followed them. And that made all the difference. To this day, I don't know how much that condemnation cost the landlord. Lost rent. Repairs. Lawsuits from other tenants. Rebuilding entire systems from scratch. I don't need to know. The important part is this: they tried to trap us in a 5-year nightmare. And instead, they lost the building. If there's one lesson I took from all of this, it's that power built on shortcuts is fragile. The louder someone insists they're in control, the more carefully you should look at what they're hiding. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Because sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't destroying someone yourself. It's watching them collapse under the weight of their own choices. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real-life revenge stories. And tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Because karma doesn't always knock. Sometimes it brings inspectors, fire marshals, and a red tag.